Alrighty everyone, welcome back to our second round of the Gaming Arena Set Champs for Azurite Sea. We have a deck list for this one from Zoe, who was kind enough to share it with me and said I could share it with all of you guys. So let's jump in and have a quick look at this deck. So this is a really cool version of Sapphire Steel, and there's actually quite a lot of Sapphire Steel decks in the tournament today. I think there was at least 7 or maybe even 8, so definitely was a good turnout for the Sapphire Steel decks, eating very well at the tournament. Bit of a different take on this one, sort of similar to your normal sort of Ramp, Lucky Dime, Tamatoa, but with a few cool inclusions here which we'll go over. So a few cool one-offs that we'll look at. Firstly, we see here the Beast Tragic Hero, definitely a card that should be on people's radar after Ed has just won the North America Continentals without any Madame Medusa, meaning all of your 3-cost characters are going to be a bit more safe now. That Beast being able to draw extra cards, and if it's damaged, take out some big threats like locations. It's definitely going to put in some work there, so definitely one I like to see. And then another one-off we see here is the Gantu Captain Crankyhead, a huge 4/3 that quests for 4. Sort of similar to Aerial, but sort of quests for 1 less when it has more items in play. But it costs 1 less and it's inkable. Definitely a cool card to have here as well. I do find the Sapphire Steel a lot of the time you do run into an issue with quite a high amount of uninkables, which is why I quite like having this extra inkable card that can also quest for a lot as well. Then we jump into a few other notable inclusions. We see here the Tadashi Hamada and the Yokai. Some interesting inclusions. We haven't really seen too much play with them before. The Tadashi, a really cool new card. If you saw my video on opening some Azurite Sea boxes, I said this card's quite interesting and could do quite well. Put that aggression on with questing for 2. Is only a 2/2, does cost 3 and uninkable, which is a little bit expensive, but it has the awesome ability that during an opponent's turn, when this character is banished, you may put the top card of your deck into the Inkwell face down. Not only that, you also get to put Tadashi himself into the Inkwell. So getting a 2 ink ramp is pretty cool there. And then we see the Yokai as well, one that I sort of overlooked a little bit. But we see Zoe here putting it to good use with the ability when your character quests, you may return one of your items to your hand and pay 2 less for the next item you play this turn. So best case scenario, I guess you return a 1-cost item to your hand and play a Lucky Dime for 5 instead of 7. So you've got that cool Popsicle on 1, Tipo on 2, Yokai on 3, and actually playing a Lucky Dime on turn 4, which is crazy to think that you can get a Lucky Dime out that fast. And then after that, you're playing Aerial and using Lucky Dime to run away with the game. And even if you can't do that with the Yokai, being able to quest, return a Popsicle or a Fortisphere to your hand, and then play it back again for free to draw an extra card, definitely a really cool card. I quite like this one. Similar in a sense to the Flaversham, except you only get to draw 1 card, and you don't have to banish it, but it quests for 2 instead of 1. So really interesting card. I like what they've done a lot with this card here in this deck, and also playing that Flaversham as well. Because if you've ever thought, hey, maybe I want some more Flaversham, but you already got 4, Yokai seems to be the card for you. And then we see a lot of other sort of, you know, typical includes the Tamatoa, Lucky Dime, the Tipo, Cogsworth, Flaversham, Vision of the Future. Let the Storm Rage on, bit of an interesting one here, but, you know, being able to deal early on with some of those aggro decks is always good as well. And then we see your Popsicle and your Fortisphere. So, unfortunately, though his opponent, Brandon, I do not have their deck list yet, but basically, from what I can understand, it is Brendan DeCandio's Diggy Diggy Hole, but with a few interesting inclusions, which I won't spoil just yet, and hopefully we'll get to see them in the video. As always, guys, we're just going to be looking at some of the plays and see what we might have done a little bit differently, where they went really well, where we might have changed things. So if you agree or disagree with anything, put it in the comments and we'll see how we go. As always, like, subscribe if you're enjoying the videos, and let's get into the round. So we see Brandon here is Alrighty, so we see Brandon here on the left against Zoe on the right. Brandon is playing that Amber Steel again, but a little bit different to the version we saw last round with the Steel Song version. This one, a bit more aggro, playing some Dwarven Mines in the dock to try and aggressively power through. So Zoe, unfortunately, not having the fire cannons in this list, is going to have a bit of trouble dealing with some of those aggressive questers early on, but does have the Storm Rage on, so going to want to try and get those singers out early. Maybe find some of those higher cost characters that you can get down. Or maybe even just get a turn 4 dime and try and run away with the game before Brennan has a chance to out-quest her. So we'll see who's going first in this game. I can't quite remember who went first, but very important in this matchup to go first. As with a lot of matchups in Lorcana, let's be honest. You definitely always want to be going first most of the time. Looks like a 6 for Zoe. And a 9 for Brandon, so it looks like he will be going first. I'm sure he'll be happy about that. Echo decks, you really always want to be going first. Alright, looks like he's got a few mines there. He's probably going to try and mulligan them away. Now the interesting thing with this deck is your mulligan, because if you do have a dock, it is a really important card, but the last thing you want is to mulligan away some cards and then draw into another dock and having to discard one of them. You could always play the first one and fail the effect, but you really only want one dock in your hand at a time. And I imagine we'll see Zoe try and get the 1-drop item on turn 1 into some ramp turn 2 and start playing some of those bigger characters. I think I saw a Porpsicle there. Is he going to mulligan 4? So I imagine she already has the ramp there in the hand. I think usually if you don't have the ramp, you're really only holding on to those 1-cost items, or maybe even a Fire the Cannons if you know you're up against an aggro deck. Really, the deck does slow down quite a lot if you don't get that turn 2 ramp. Alrighty, so I imagine Brandon will be going first in this game. Yeah, so we do see Zoe did have the sale, the Azurite Seas, the 1-cost item. And really after the sale, all you want is another 1-cost item to play after that. So let's get into our game. We see really wanting to find a 1-drop here for Brandon. Basically that's what he's looking for. And I don't know if he has it. There we go. We do see straight off the bat that spicy inclusion of the Chien Po. Now Brandon did tell me that he swapped out 2 of the Ketas for 2 of the Chien Pos, which I really quite like the change here. You know, the Keita just buys you 1 turn, doesn't really take care of any characters on the board, but the Chien Po can be quite good at making your opponent use some of their characters to try and remove them and even up the board a little bit when you feel like you're falling a bit behind. So we do see the 1 cost, and then looks like Brandon might have top decked the Daisy. You really would have liked to see that on turn 1. But that's alright. We'll probably see the Piglet come down. And then threatening a 3 Lore Quest with that next turn. Now, I imagine Zoe is really going to be wishing she had that Fire the Cannons now. There we see that spice inclusion of the Yokai. And the Calhoun come down. Definitely a nice card to have early in the aggro matchups. Keep some control of the board and also progress your own lore. Now let's see how Brendan decides to deal with this. And he's just going to go aggressive. It'll be interesting to see if he quests. He probably will. So going to go up to 5 lore on turn 3. Already putting on the pressure. Zoe will have to deal with this. Quite like the quest here with the Piglet, you know, making Zoe decide if she wants to trade with the Calhoun, and then Brandon having that option to come back in with the other Calhoun and gain another 2 lore. I think Zoe sort of have to take this trade. You can take out the Piglet and fire the cannons the happy. Or you can always save, or not fire the cannons, like the Storm Rage on. Or you can preemptively, you know, maybe storm into the Daisy, maybe hope you draw another one, or get another Calhoun down. And we do see the challenge there. We'll be getting the 2 law. Yep, so only going to deal the 1 damage to the Calhoun, unfortunately, with that one. Yeah, and does decide to go against the Happy. I think you just got to take the banishes when you can. And we'll see. Managing to keep a lid on this board for now. Brendan is quickly running out of cards though. Looks like there's a Storm Rage on in hand. So we're going to see the Hades going to the hand of Zoe. We're going to see the trade of the Calhouns. Get another 2 law from Brandon. Go up to 9, and Zoe's going to start feeling the pressure now. So now we see the sale come down. Going to start trying to ramp. Definitely want to try and get towards those Hades so you can remove some of these characters. Would be good to try and find another Calhoun here. Looks like she has another sale in hand, so I think playing another sale here just to ramp up to 6. He's going to play the Tadashi, so I think next turn with this Tadashi, you can't afford to quest with it. You do have to just challenge. Get the ramp that way, because I think at this stage, Brandon, he's not caring, so he's going to quest away with 2. With the Tadashi, he's just going to keep doing his own thing and racking up the law. So we see the quest for 2, putting up to 11. Going to reveal the Let It Go. Would have liked to hold on to that one for Zoe. Nice answer to deal with some of these characters for Brandon, but that is the double-edged sword of Daisy. You can give you cards, but can just as easily put all the good ones on the bottom of your deck. Now, we see the Storm Rage on here, but it's probably not something you want to be doing, because that'll give Zoe 2 extra law. 2 extra ink, sorry. We see the Dwarf Mine come down. Probably won't be using the ability too much just yet, but nice to have a 6 willpower location. They'll just get a law every turn. Going to push him closer to 20. Now, Zoe had played the Sale last turn instead of the Tadashi. We could be at 6, and 1 more ink would put to 7 to play the Hades and get rid of that Daisy Duck. Unfortunately, just going to be stuck with this 2 strength, 2 willpower character, which isn't going to be doing too much. This may spell disaster for Zoe here, not having an option to remove some of these characters. Brandon looks like he'll be getting 5 law next turn, putting him up to 16. Unlike some of those Amethyst decks, he doesn't have access to that instant law gain, so we'll have to make sure he has characters down. But Zoe not running anything like the Tinkerbell or the Simba fighting Prince means she won't have a really good way to keep this board clear. That's sort of your main answer against some of these Amber Steel decks. You know, having to put the Lilo into play exerted from the discard means that it is susceptible to being challenged, and then dealing some extra damage on the side from the Tinkerbell and Simba. But Zoe not having access to that option is going to make this matchup quite difficult. So we see going to 6 here for Zoe, but yeah, I mean, I think Tadashi just has to challenge into the mine, maybe. We'll see what we get off this second sale. Ink the Flaversham. Yep, so this beast isn't going to be helping clear. So I think, yeah, Tadashi probably just needed to challenge into maybe even the Lawrence and just get that extra 2 ramp and start playing a few more cards next turn. I believe Tadashi is when it's banished in a... banished at all, not just during your opponent's turn. So you see the quest for 2 and the trigger for the Dwarf Mine will put Brandon up to 14 and then the Lawrence to 16. So just 2 law away from winning, and I'm afraid it might be too little too late for Zoe. See here, Brandon having the option to play the Storm Rage on into the beast to prevent it from drawing, but you definitely don't want to be giving it too much strength at this stage, being able to clear some of your characters. So gets the extra draw from the beast, but I don't think cards is Zoe's problem. It's removal options for these characters. So we'll need to remove 2 characters, or a character in a location. So a Hades would do it if she had challenged last turn with the Tadashi, but she just quests, so unfortunately I don't think she has the cards in hand to ward off another turn from Brandon, and that's the power, but also sometimes the weakness of this Amber Steel deck. It can go very quick, but it definitely starts to run out of cards towards the end. That's why this Lilo was such a buff for this deck. But once it starts running out of cards, you can sort of take the game back, but Zoe just not able to stay in the game long enough for that to happen, and might just get run over by Brandon in this. And there we see the fist bump, signaling Brandon taking the first game. He did go first, so I guess in game 2 Zoe will have that going for her. She'll be able to go first and hopefully be a bit more aggressive herself and put the pressure on as well. So I think Zoe again in this game 2 in her mulligan's probably just going to be looking for a 1-drop, her Porpsicle or Fortisphere, her ramp on 2, either the Sail or Tipo, and then maybe turn 4 a Flavisham or maybe even a Yokai might be better. Now Yokai is an interesting card, which I talked a bit about in the deck preview, but I think specifically in this Sapphire Steel deck where you have 8 1-drop items that draw a card for you, it's really almost as good as the Flavisham. Unfortunately, Ruby Sapphire has been the main Sapphire deck that's been getting all the praise. And in that Ruby Sapphire deck, you don't really want to be using the Yokai since you only have the 4 Porpsicles, but in the Sapphire Steel deck, it's a different story. We see Zoe there holding on to the 2 1-drops. Definitely didn't have any ramp there by the looks of it. So definitely digging deep to try and get the ramp. Oh no, she kept 3, so maybe she does have the 2 1-drop items and the ramp in hand. So good looking start here for Zoe. Just needs some characters to try and keep the board under the control of her steel characters. So I think things like a Smee and a Calhoun will definitely be something she wants to find early on in this game. Maybe even foregoing the turn 2 ramp just to keep that board under control while she starts ramping up. So we did see a Sail there, Tadashi, and the Calhoun. So pretty good hand here for Zoe. This is definitely what you want to be seeing. You don't feel great about inking the Let It Go, but a lot of Brendan's characters do have quite low costs and not something you really want to be paying 5 ink to remove something like a Lilo. Although it will go to the ink and won't be coming back from the discard after that. So it could be a good option for removing these Lilos for good. But unfortunately we'll have to ink it since the other cards draw you cards, and the hands, after these few turns, you definitely need to find something else that you want to be doing other than just playing items and ramping up. You got to find some of those big characters you can play. So imagine we'll see a Sail come in, ink a card, and play a Fortisphere. Might be contemplating the Calhoun. So the Calhoun here is quite interesting since it won't take out the Daisy, but maybe if she had something like a Tipo, that could be a good alternative. Having that 1 strength character to put the 1 on the Daisy, so then you can finish it off with the Calhoun. But Zoe understanding that this matchup, it's all about board control until she can get into the late game. And prioritizing that board presence early on, which I think is smart. You definitely need to be doing that in this matchup. Especially without things like Tinkerbell and Simba, where you don't have that as much incentive to get to that high ink cost cards. You don't mind foregoing this ramp a little bit early on. And we see the Tipo there. It would have been a good one last turn, but... And now we see the issue here with playing this Calhoun, that Brandon actually didn't quest with the Daisy. So Zoe's Calhoun here sort of doing what she wants in threatening Brandon in forcing him to not quest. We see the Flavisham there for Zoe, which is very good. She definitely likes to see that. Drawing cards is always half the battle. Might even play another sail here. Yeah, now I like this from Zoe. Ink the Fortisphere though. I wonder if she has another one cost. She does, she has another Fortisphere. Now up to 5, going into 6 next turn, and it's only her 3rd turn of the game. This is the power of the Sapphire decks. Ramping up to those big ink numbers and getting some big cost characters down, threatening to run away with the game. Now it's up to Brand to decide what he wants to do here. Does he just want to quest? He will quest, revealing the Porpsicle going to the bottom of the deck. Now this is quite interesting. I'm not sure why he didn't quest last turn with this Daisy. Maybe he's concerned about giving more cards to Zoe, but I think your Calhoun would have been, or your Daisy would have been safe from the Calhoun, and he did have the Smee to challenge into it next turn. Whereas now you are actually giving Zoe the option to get 2 lore from the Calhoun. So we might even just have a Storm Rage on to deal with this Smee. In which case the Calhoun could challenge into something like the Mine. Putting it on a 2-turn clock to being banished. Another Fortisphere coming down. Let's see if we find that Flavisham. Maybe draw some extra cards. We do see that Grammatala actually. That could be quite a good option as well. It has a bit more strength than the Flavisham. We'll be able to keep this board in check a bit more. Does decide to ink the Grammatala instead. Interesting. Might have a few uninkables in hand that she's not able to play. So does play the Yokai, similar to the Grammatala, but does quest for 1 more. I think I would have liked to see the Grammatala instead come down here. Just digging that little bit deeper into the deck, because you're most likely going to have to use this Yokai to challenge anyway. So you won't be able to get to use his ability, and you might as well just have those extra card in hand and dig through your deck with the Grammatala. So we see a Pete up the top. Brandon just going to want to threaten more. And we do see the strength anyway, so even if the Grammatala did come down, that would have been removed with the strength. So another Porpsicle going to the bottom. So after inking a Fortisphere, playing 2, and now 2 Porpsicles to the bottom, there's not many items left for her to draw, so I think that might have been a lucky dime top deck. So that actually would have been really interesting if Zoe was able to keep the Yokai around. Might have even opted to quest to play the dime instead. Double Tadashi coming down. Unfortunately, Brandon is already questing heavily and probably just going to be ignoring these. Pete comes down, preventing any actions from Zoe like a Storm Rage on or a Let It Go. Questing for 2. Going to put a Fishbone to the bottom. Goes up to 9. And now to 12, I believe, so almost threatening to win next turn. Not quite though, so Zoe will have 2 more turns to try and deal with this board. Maybe something like a double challenge into Lawrence, at least that way you get to keep one of the Tadashis and the other one can go into the Inkwell. The concern is if you do hit that Hades off the top. I believe she only plays 1, so that's going to be quite an important resource for her to keep around, since a lot of her characters aren't that good at questing. Does decide to just take out the Daisy. It's always interesting on deciding what to challenge. I think you'd always rather keep around the Daisy if there's another 2 lore character on board, because Daisy's going to give you extra cards. that can give you more options. So what was that top deck here for Brandon? See the Happy and the Lilo by the looks of it. So I believe that puts Brandon up to 17 now. So he does have to clear this entire board of exerted cards and the Happy as well. Might prove a bit of a challenge. Going to have trouble with that location, I think, is going to be the real issue here. Can probably get rid of a few other characters. And Zoe realizing that she can't win, but she's just going to quest to put up on the board up to 11 to make it look a little bit closer. But unfortunately, with the lack of some of those removal cards like Simba and Tinkerbell, was not able to conquer the aggressive nature of the Amber Steel deck. And that is that. So round 2 finished up. We've got a few players on 2-0s. And will be interesting to see what we have on stream next round. As always, if you enjoy the content, like and subscribe, and put any comments down there on things you might have done differently, or if you think I might have got it wrong with a few of the calls. And I will see you all in the next video.